There's a name for people like me, the responsible one. It's not a compliment. It's a job title for an unpaid position you never applied for. For me, Soleil, it's meant being the family's silent shock absorber for most of my 35 years. It's meant quietly co-signing a car loan for my dad when his credit was shot. It's meant mediating every holiday fight between my mother and her sister. And for the last 3 years, it's meant paying the mortgage on my parents' house. They don't know, of course. 3 years ago, my dad, Warren, who just turned 60, made a disastrously bad investment. They were a month from default, and the shame would have socially crippled them. So I did what I always do. I stepped in. I called their lender, rerouted the automatic payments to my account, and told my parents I'd sorted it out with the bank to get them a temporary deferment. They were so relieved they never asked any follow-up questions. The silence that followed was the most expensive thing I've ever owned. Meanwhile, my sister Callie, who is a perfect, gleaming 30, parades her life across Instagram like a one-woman victory tour. Here's Callie with a new Balenciaga bag, a surprise from Mum and Dad. Here's Callie on a spa weekend in the wine country, a much-needed break from the stress of planning her $250,000 wedding. Her life is a highlight reel funded by the bank of my parents' affection, an account I've never been able to make a deposit into. My life is different. My husband Remy and I live in a modest condo a half-hour away from my family. He's a high school history teacher, and I work in commercial real estate. We're comfortable, but we're not extravagant. Every spare dollar, every bit of emotional energy has been funneled into one, all-consuming goal: having a baby. After years of dead ends and heartbreak, we have one last chance. One single, solitary, genetically tested embryo currently frozen in a lab across town. Our little popsicle of hope. The transfer, the medication, the monitoring, the whole procedure comes with a price tag of $30,000. It's money we just don't have. We've drained our savings, maxed out what we can borrow against my 401k, and we're still short. The deadline from the clinic is in 6 weeks. We have to ask them, I told Remy last night, staring at the ceiling of our bedroom. He sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of my family's dysfunction. Sol, you know what they're going to say. I'm not asking for a gift, I insisted, my voice tight. I'm asking for a loan, the same kind of help they've given Callie a dozen times. I'm paying for their damn house. The equity is there. It's not an unreasonable request. It's not about reason with them, he said gently. He's 34 and has the patience of a saint, but I can see the cracks forming. He's tired of watching me throw myself against this familial brick wall, but I had to try. For that one little embryo. For us. So tonight, I'm sitting in my parents' kitchen, the same kitchen I played in as a child, the same one I'm secretly keeping from foreclosure. The air is thick with the scent of lilies, Callie's favourite, and wedding talk. My mother, Cynthia, is showing me fabric swatches for the reception tablecloths. Do you think the champagne or the eggshell brings out the gold inlay on the invitations better, honey? She asks, holding them under the light. She's 58, but fights it with the ferocity of a general, her face a smooth, unlined mask. They're both nice, Mum. Callie prefers the champagne. She says eggshell is for peasants, she says with a little laugh, as if Callie has just said the most charming thing in the world. My dad is at the table, nodding along, a silent partner in my mother's lifelong worship of her younger daughter. I take a deep breath, my heart pounding against my ribs. It's now or never. Actually, I needed to talk to you both about something, I begin, my voice steadier than I feel. It's about the IVF. My mother's smile tightens. Infertility is a messy, unpleasant topic. It doesn't fit with the perfect family image. Oh, Soleil, are you still dwelling on that? It's our last chance, Mum. We have one viable embryo left. The procedure costs $30,000 and we're short. I was hoping you could help us. With a loan. We'd pay it all back. With interest. The words hang in the air, heavy and vulnerable. My dad shifts in his chair, looking down at his hands. My mother just stares at me, her head tilted. The curated warmth in her eyes vanishes, replaced by something cold and sharp. Then she laughs. It's not a giggle. It's a short, sharp, incredulous bark of a laugh, a sound that dismisses every bit of my pain, every ounce of my desperation in one brutal second. $30,000? She scoffs, shaking her head as if I'd just asked for a unicorn. Oh, honey. You've always been the dramatic one. That sound, that short, sharp, dismissive laugh, echoed in the sudden silence of the kitchen. It replayed in my head, a perfect loop of my own insignificance. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. My mother's face was still twisted in that smirk of mild amusement, as if I were a child who had just asked for a pony for Christmas. My father stared intently at the wood grain of the table, a master of strategic invisibility. Dramatic? I finally whispered, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. My husband and I have spent every dollar we have trying to build a family. We have one last chance. And you think that's dramatic? Cynthia waved a dismissive hand, already reaching for the fabric swatches again. Oh, don't be so sensitive, Soleil. It's just not a good time. With Callie's wedding, all our resources are tied up. You understand. I didn't. I didn't understand at all. I looked at the two of them, my parents, sitting in their beautiful home with its granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, a home I was paying for, and felt a cold, hard clarity settle over me. It was the kind of clarity that comes after a high fever breaks. The world looked different, sharper. I stood up. My chair scraped against the tile floor, a harsh, ugly sound in the quiet room. "Where are you going?" my mother asked, her voice laced with irritation, as if I were the one being rude. I didn't answer. I picked up my purse from the counter, slung the strap over my shoulder, and walked out of the kitchen. I walked through the living room, past the framed photos of Callie's dance recitals and graduation, past the empty space on the mantel where my own achievements were never displayed. I opened the front door and walked out into the cool night air without looking back. The drive home was a blur. The laugh just kept playing. Ha! A single syllable that erased 35 years of being the good daughter, the responsible one. The pain was a physical thing, a hot stone in my chest. But as I drove, something else began to bubble up underneath it. Anger. A deep tectonic rage I hadn't realized I was capable of feeling. When I got home, Remy was in the living room grading papers. He looked up, and the concern on his face made my throat tighten. "How did it go?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. I dropped my keys on the entry table and just shook my head, the tears I'd been holding back finally starting to fall. He was across the room in a second, wrapping his arms around me. I buried my face in his shoulder and told him everything. The swatches, the condescending tone, the laugh. He held me, stroking my hair, letting me cry it out. When I finally quieted, he tilted my chin up. "I'm so sorry, Saul. I'm so sorry they did that to you." She called me dramatic, I choked out. "I know." He sighed, his own frustration evident. He looked at me, his eyes full of a sad, tired love. "You can't keep sacrificing yourself for people who don't even say thank you. You just can't." His words weren't an accusation. They were a release. Permission. Later that night, long after Remy was asleep, I sat in the dark of our home office, the glow of the monitor painting my face. I logged into my bank account. I navigated to the bill pay section, my fingers moving with a strange, detached precision. There it was, the recurring monthly payment to my parents' mortgage lender, $2,147. For 3 years, that number had been my secret burden, my silent contribution. I stared at it for a long time. Then I clicked, Manage Payment. A new screen popped up. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet house. I moved the cursor over the button that read, Cancel this series. I took a deep, shuddering breath and clicked it. A confirmation box appeared. Are you sure you want to cancel all future payments? Yes, I was sure. The next morning, I sent a text to my friend Elias, a real estate attorney I've worked with for years. Hey, got a minute for a weird hypothetical question? He called me almost immediately. Nothing you ask is ever as weird as you think it is, he said, his voice cheerful. What's up? I gave him the heavily redacted version. Hypothetically, I said, if someone was about to default on their mortgage, what's the general timeline for foreclosure in this state? He gave me the rundown. The notice of default, the reinstatement period, the notice of sale. It was a cold, clinical process, a machine with gears that were already beginning to turn. Why the sudden interest in foreclosure law? He asked. Everything okay? Just doing some research, I lied smoothly. Thanks, Elias. I owe you one. I felt a prickle of guilt for deceiving him, but it was drowned out by a wave of something else, something that felt dangerously like power. That evening, as I was making dinner, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from my mother. My stomach clenched. Hi, honey. Hope you're not still in a mood. Callie and I are doing a final walkthrough with the florist tomorrow and could use your eye for the entryway arrangement. You're so good with these low-stress tasks. Let me know what time works. I stared at my mother's text, the cheerful, oblivious words a stark contrast to the cold fury simmering in my gut. Low-stress tasks. That's all I was to them. A reliable appliance. I typed back a simple, non-committal reply. Sorry, swamped at work this week. I didn't offer an alternative. I didn't apologize further. I just let the silence hang there. About 5 weeks later, it happened. The first official notice arrived at their house. My mother called me, her voice a frantic buzz of indignation. Soleil, you will not believe the incompetence of these banks, she began, without so much as a hello. They sent us a letter, a certified letter, can you imagine, saying we're in default on the mortgage. It must be some kind of clerical error. Your father is on the phone with them now, but you know how he gets flustered. I leaned back in my office chair, gazing out the window at the city skyline. I made my voice a perfect blend of surprise and concern. A default notice? Wow, Mum, that's serious. What did the bank say when you called them before? There was a brief pause. Well, we haven't called them. We just assumed you'd handled that deferment thing permanently. The deferment was temporary, I said, keeping my tone even. I told you that 3 years ago. It was just to get you through that rough patch. It was a lie, of course, but a lie they had willingly believed. It was the foundation of the story I had built for them. This is just ridiculous, she huffed. I'm sure Warren will sort it out. He didn't. The weeks crawled by, and the official notices kept coming. I knew the timeline by heart, thanks to Elias. After the notice of default, they had a 90-day window to cure the default, to pay what was owed. I knew my parents didn't have the money. Callie's wedding vendors were cashing checks for floral arrangements and custom ice sculptures, draining every last cent of their liquidity. No one suspected a thing. To them, I was just busy Soleil, the ever-reliable daughter who was being a little distant lately. I played my part beautifully. I'd call to check in, listen to my mother's latest complaints about the bank's harassment, and offer vague, unhelpful advice. You should probably call them back, Mum. Have you looked at the paperwork they sent? Meanwhile, a new dark habit was forming. I became a digital ghost, haunting my own family home. I had Zillow alerts set up. I bookmarked the county tax assessor's website. I learned how to navigate public records, pulling up the deed and the mortgage documents. I watched, with a cold and thrilling detachment, as the status of their property shifted from active to pre-foreclosure. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, but instead of horror, I felt a grim, satisfying sense of control. This secret was mine. It was a source of power in a life where I'd had none. Callie, of course, remained blissfully unaware, her world still spinning on its perfect, gilded axis. Her maid of honour, Roslyn, a woman who seemed to exist solely to document Callie's fabulousness, posted a daily countdown to the wedding on Instagram. 78 days until the wedding of the century. The post was accompanied by a photo of Callie trying on a diamond necklace that probably cost more than my car. I scrolled past it, a bitter smile on my face. The obsession began to worry Remy. He'd find me late at night, the glow of my laptop illuminating the determined set of my jaw. "What are you looking at?" he asked one night, standing in the doorway of the office. "Just work stuff," I lied. He walked over and looked at the screen, where the county records for my parents' address were displayed. He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "Sol, this isn't healthy. You cancelled the payment. That was the consequence. You need to let it go now, for your own sake." "I can't," I said, my voice low. "Not yet. They need to understand." "Understand what?" "That actions have consequences?" He countered, his voice gentle but firm. "They're in their 60s, Soleil. They're not going to change. This isn't about teaching them a lesson anymore. This is about you. And it's eating you alive." He was right, but I couldn't stop. The sense of impending justice was a drug, and I was addicted. He wanted closure. He wanted us to move on, to focus on our own lives, on finding a way forward after the IVF disappointment. But I wanted justice. The scales had been unbalanced for 35 years, and I was finally going to watch them level out. The 90-day reinstatement period ended. The next notice was the Notice of Trustees sale, the final, irreversible step. The date was set. One morning, as I scrolled through my usual websites, my breath caught in my throat. There it was, a new listing on an auction site. The address was instantly recognizable. My childhood home. The photo showed the familiar brick facade, the manicured lawn, the big oak tree in the front yard. Underneath, in stark black letters, were the words, "Auction date, 21 days." The auction listing felt like the starting gun I'd been waiting for. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, exhilarating rhythm. I immediately called Elias. "It's listed," I said, my voice low and urgent. 21 days. "Okay," he said, his tone calm and professional. He'd moved past the why of it all and was now focused on the how. "First thing we need to do is form an LLC. We'll call it something generic, a property holdings group. It'll shield your identity completely. Then we need to get your funds in order. You'll need a cashier's check for the deposit on the day of the auction and proof of funds for the full amount." The next 2 weeks were a blur of paperwork and clandestine financial maneuvers. I set up the LLC under Elias's guidance, Northwood Property Holdings, LLC. It sounded sterile and corporate, the perfect anonymous shield. Getting the money together was the harder part. I had a decent amount in savings, money that had been earmarked for another round of fertility treatments before we got the news about our last embryo. Using it for this felt like a bitter, ironic twist of fate. I supplemented it with a loan from my 401k, the maximum I could take without raising red flags. The process left me feeling hollowed out, but determined. I told no one, not even Remy. This was my war, and I was fighting it alone. All the while, life at my parents' house continued in a state of spectacular denial. They were treating the foreclosure notices like junk mail. One afternoon, my mother sent me a picture of a new chandelier they'd had installed in the dining room. It was a monstrosity of crystal and brass that looked like it belonged in a palace. "What do you think, sweetie?" It was $12,000, but Callie insisted it was essential for the rehearsal dinner ambiance. I stared at the photo, the sheer, willful ignorance of it taking my breath away. They were hemorrhaging money on wedding decor while a financial guillotine hung over their heads. The irony was so thick, it was suffocating. A week before the auction, my mother called and invited me over for dinner. "Just a normal family dinner," she'd said. "It feels like we haven't seen you in ages." I knew what it really was. A final performance. My last supper in the house as their daughter. I accepted. Walking through the front door that night felt different. Every detail seemed hyper-vivid. The scuff mark on the baseboard in the entryway that had been there since I was 10. the faint scent of my dad's pipe tobacco that always clung to the curtains in his study. I was a ghost in my own past, cataloguing memories before the demolition. Dinner was a masterclass in avoidance. We talked about the weather, my work, and, of course, the wedding. Callie chatted on about her bachelorette party in Miami, her dress fittings, the drama with the string quartet. I nodded and smiled, a perfect porcelain doll of a daughter. I studied every corner of the room, every picture on the wall, committing it to memory. I wasn't just saying goodbye to the house, I was saying goodbye to the person I used to be in it. The next time I walked through this door, I wouldn't be family. I would be the owner. As I was helping my mother clear the plates, Callie leaned against the kitchen island, a smug, self-satisfied smile playing on her lips. She placed a hand protectively over her flat stomach. "Well, since we're all here," she announced, her eyes flicking to me for a fraction of a second, "I guess we have some news." My mother gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my goodness." "Callie, are you—" Callie nodded, her smile widening into a triumphant grin. "I'm pregnant. Just 6 weeks, but we're so excited. Looks like I'm going to make you a grandmother first, after all." The plates in my hands suddenly felt impossibly heavy. The sound in the room seemed to warp and fade, replaced by a high-pitched ringing in my ears. She had done it. She had effortlessly achieved the one thing I had fought and bled and paid for, the one thing I wanted more than anything in the world. And she had announced it like she was winning a race. My race. I set the plates down on the counter before I dropped them. I could feel my mother's pitying gaze on me, my father's awkward discomfort. Callie's victory was complete. I mumbled my congratulations, my voice sounding like it was coming from a great distance. I made my excuses, an early meeting, a headache, and fled. As I drove away, I saw Elias's words flash in my mind. "No one walks away from a fire without getting smoke in their lungs." I was already choking on it, but I wasn't walking away. I was walking toward the flames, holding a can of gasoline. Auction day arrived on a Tuesday. It was grey and overcast, the sky the colour of dirty dishwater. The auction itself was an anticlimactic, bureaucratic affair held on the steps of the county courthouse. I didn't go. Elias went for me, armed with the LLC paperwork and the cashier's check. I sat at my desk at work, staring at my computer screen, pretending to analyse spreadsheets while my phone lay face down beside me. Every buzz made my heart leap into my throat. At 11:17 a.m, Elias sent a text. "It's done. Congratulations. You're a homeowner." I read the words, but they didn't quite register. There was no triumphant surge of victory, just a quiet, hollow hum. I had done it. I had actually done it. I typed back, "Thank you," my fingers feeling clumsy and disconnected from my brain. For the rest of the week, an eerie silence fell. My family, completely oblivious, went about their lives. Callie posted a photo of her ultrasound, a tiny grey speck against a black background. "Our little miracle," she captioned it. My mother called to gush about the photo, her voice dripping with joy. I said all the right things, my own voice a flat, dead thing in my ear. I was living a double life, and the strain of it was starting to wear me down. The official notice of sale was recorded the following Monday. By Wednesday, the eviction notice was posted on their front door. The explosion I'd been anticipating for months finally happened. It started with a hysterical call from my mother. I let it go to voicemail. "Soleil, you have to call me back. There are men here, moving trucks. They're saying the house was sold. It's a mistake. It has to be a mistake. The bank is trying to steal our home." Then came the texts, a frantic barrage from both her and Callie. I ignored them all. I turned my phone off and sat in the quiet of my condo, the silence a welcome relief. I knew I couldn't hide from Remy forever. He came home that evening to find me sitting on the sofa in the dark. He didn't even have to ask. He just looked at my face and knew. "You did it, didn't you?" he said, his voice quiet, devoid of accusation, but heavy with disappointment. I nodded. unable to meet his eyes. He sank onto the armchair across from me, running a hand over his face. I found the withdrawal slip from your 401k account. The letter came today. You formed an LLC, Sol. You bought your parents' house out from under them. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I had to, I whispered, the words sounding weak even to my own ears. No, you didn't, he said, his voice rising with a frustration he could no longer contain. You didn't have to do this. You could have let the bank take it. You could have walked away, but you had to be the one holding the knife. You lied to me. You drained our accounts, money we were saving for our future, for another chance at a family if this last one doesn't work. All for what? To punish them? It's not punishment, it's justice, I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. This isn't justice anymore, he shot back, standing up and pacing the small living room. This is vengeance, and it's killing you, Soleil. Can't you see that? It's twisting you into someone I don't even recognize, someone bitter and secretive and cruel. His words were a punch to the gut, because I knew he was right. The secret had been a poison, seeping into every part of my life, tainting everything. The satisfaction I thought I would feel was nowhere to be found, replaced by a gnawing emptiness. They laughed at me, Remy, I said, my voice breaking. They laughed when I begged them for help to have a child. I know, he said, his anger softening into a deep, profound sadness. And that was unforgivable. But what you did, this is something else. This is a fire you can't put out. He walked over to the window, staring out at the city lights. I don't know if I can do this anymore. I can't live in the middle of all this hate. I need some space. I'm going to go stay with my brother for a few days. My world tilted on its axis. Remy, no. Please. I just need to think, he said, his back still to me. We both do. He left an hour later, packing a small bag in near silence. The click of the front door shutting behind him was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I was alone, truly alone, in the wreckage I had created. I curled up on the sofa, pulling a blanket around me, and finally turned my phone back on. It lit up instantly, a cascade of missed calls and frantic messages. One text from Callie, sent just a few minutes ago, stood out. You won't believe who bought the house. I stared at Callie's text, a cold dread mixing with a grim sense of inevitability. They knew, or at least they were about to. The anonymous LLC was a legal shield, but it wouldn't take a genius to connect the dots. I was the only person with the motive and, as far as they knew, the means. My phone buzzed again. It was Callie. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered, my voice a flat, steady calm I didn't feel. Hello, Callie. Soleil. Thank God. Her voice was a high-pitched shriek of panic. Some corporate monster bought the house. Northwood Property Holdings. Have you ever heard of them? They sent an agent over with a formal notice to vacate. We have 30 days. 30 days, Soleil. Can you believe it? My wedding is in 2 months. My baby shower is supposed to be here. What are we going to do? The practiced calm held. Pack, I said. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. What? Pack? We need a lawyer. We need to fight this. You work in real estate. You have to know someone who can help us. There's nothing to fight, Callie. The sale was legal. The bank foreclosed. But who would do this? Who would be so cruel? She wailed. The moment had arrived, the point of no return. Pack first, I said, my voice dropping to a low, even tone. Then we'll talk. I hung up before she could respond. The next few weeks were a maelstrom of chaos that I observed from a distance. My parents, forced to confront the reality they'd ignored for months, were in a full-blown panic. They left me dozens of voicemails, swinging wildly from begging to blaming. I didn't listen to them. I let the eviction process, managed by a third-party property management company Elias had hired, run its cold, bureaucratic course. On the 30th day, the day they were legally required to be out, I drove to the house. It was late afternoon, and the street was quiet. a single moving van was pulling away from the curb, leaving the house looking strangely empty and forlorn. I had arranged this meeting. I told them to leave the keys on the counter and that a representative from the new ownership would do a final walkthrough. I let myself in with the copy of the key Elias had given me. The house was hollow, echoing with every footstep. Furniture was gone, leaving pale rectangles on the walls where pictures used to hang. Boxes were stacked haphazardly in the corners. My parents and Callie were standing in the middle of the living room, looking lost and defeated. My mother saw me first. Her face, puffy from crying, hardened into a mask of confusion and anger. "Soleil, what are you doing here?" "The agent from that horrible company is supposed to be meeting us." "I'm the agent," I said, my voice steady. I walked past them, my heels clicking on the hardwood floors. I moved from room to room, a silent inspector in my own history. I ran a hand along the dusty mantelpiece in the living room. I walked into the dining room and stared up at the bare wires where the $12,000 chandelier had hung. They must have taken it. I made a mental note to have Elias bill them for it. Finally, I ended up in the kitchen. It was the heart of the house, the place where all the family's triumphs and cruelties had been served up. My parents and Callie followed me, their expressions a mixture of bewilderment and dawning horror. I stopped at the huge granite island in the centre of the room. I reached into my purse, pulled out the set of keys, and dropped them onto the counter. They landed with a sharp, definitive clatter that echoed in the empty space. My mother flinched. My father just stared at the keys, his face ashen. Callie's mouth fell open. "What is this?" my mother whispered. I looked her directly in the eye, letting all the years of silent resentment, all the swallowed pain, surface. "I've always paid for everything around here," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "The mortgage, the bills you forgot, the peace of mind. I guess that makes me the owner now." The comprehension that washed over their faces was slow, then total. It was like watching the sun rise on a battlefield. "You?" Callie breathed, her hand flying to her stomach. "You did this to us?" "No," I said, turning my gaze to her. "I did this for me." "We'll sue you," she shrieked, her face contorting with rage. "This is illegal. You can't just—" "Actually," a calm voice said from the doorway, "she can, and it's all perfectly legal." Elias stepped into the kitchen, holding a leather-bound portfolio. He gave my family a polite, professional nod. "Elias Mackenzie," he said, extending a hand that no one took. "I represent Northwood Property Holdings, and I can assure you every I has been dotted and every T has been crossed." Elias's presence sucked all the air out of the room. Callie's threat of legal action died on her lips, replaced by a sputtering, impotent rage. My father, who had been a silent statue, finally seemed to crumple, leaning heavily against a counter for support. He looked older than his 60 years, a man hollowed out by his own passivity. "Why?" my mother finally asked, her voice a raw, broken whisper. It wasn't an accusation anymore. It was a genuine, bewildered question. "Soleil, why would you do this to your own family?" "You're the one who answered that question, Mom," I said, my voice devoid of heat. "You answered it when you laughed in my face. You've been answering it my whole life every time you chose her over me." I gestured toward Callie, who was staring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You ruined my life," Callie screamed, her voice cracking. "My wedding is in 6 weeks. The invitations have gone out. The vendors are all booked. Where are we supposed to have the rehearsal dinner? Where am I supposed to get ready? You did this just to ruin my wedding." The sheer, breathtaking selfishness of her words was almost impressive. Even now, with her family's life in ruins, her primary concern was the logistics of her perfect day. "Your wedding was a party," I said calmly. "A $250,000 party you couldn't afford, held in a house you weren't paying for. It was never real." The fallout was swift and catastrophic. Within days, the carefully constructed facade of the Wright family crumbled. Callie, unable to secure a new venue on such short notice without a massive infusion of cash they no longer had, was forced to cancel the wedding. The whispers started immediately. Roslyn, her ever-loyal maid of honour, tried to spin a story about a sudden family emergency, but the truth, in all its delicious, scandalous detail, began to leak out. Vendors, unpaid, started calling. Guests, confused, started gossiping. Callie's perfect Instagram feed went dark. My mother tried to salvage their social standing, but the damage was done. They were a cautionary tale, the family who flew too close to the sun on wings of credit and denial. In the midst of the chaos, my father's fragile health gave way. He had a panic attack so severe my mother thought he was having a heart attack and called an ambulance. He was fine, physically, but the incident seemed to break something in him. He was discharged the next day, a quiet, diminished man. My mother called me from the hospital waiting room. "He just kept saying your name," she said, her voice heavy with a new, unfamiliar weight. He said you were never meant to carry so much, that it was his job, and he failed." It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from them, but it was years too late. The words were just echoes in an empty house. The final confrontation with Callie happened a week later. She showed up at my condo unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing in the hallway, her face pale and tear-streaked, her designer handbag looking absurdly out of place. "I hope you're happy," she spat, pushing past me into the living room. "You've destroyed everything." "I didn't destroy anything that wasn't already broken," I replied, closing the door. "You've always been jealous of me," she sneered. "Always. Because Mom and Dad loved me more. Because I was prettier. Because everything has always come so easily to me." "You're right," I said, and the admission seemed to surprise her. "Everything did come easily to you. Your clothes, your car, your vacations, your wedding. You know why? Because I was paying for it. Not with my money, but with my silence, with my compliance. You got everything you ever wanted, Callie. I just took back what I let you borrow." We stood there, two sisters on opposite sides of a chasm that had been decades in the making. The golden child and the responsible one. Her crown was tarnished, her kingdom in ashes. And I was free. It wasn't a joyful, triumphant freedom. It was a stark, quiet, lonely freedom. I hadn't won. I had just stopped losing a game that was rigged from the start. As she stood there, glaring at me, a sharp, sudden cramp seized my abdomen. It was intense, a hot poker twisting deep inside me. I gasped, doubling over slightly and bracing myself against the back of the sofa. Callie's expression shifted from anger to a flicker of alarm. "What's wrong with you?" I couldn't answer. Another wave of pain hit, stronger this time. I felt a terrifying, familiar warmth spread between my legs. My blood ran cold. "No, not now! Please, not now!" I stumbled toward the bathroom, my vision starting to tunnel. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking as I reached for the light switch. When I looked down, I saw the bright, damning crimson staining my jeans. The last little popsicle of hope was melting away. The next few weeks passed in a muted haze of grief and drywall dust. The call from the fertility clinic confirming the IVF had failed was clinical and brief, a sterile postscript to a messy emotional war. The loss of the embryo was a quiet, private sorrow, a stark contrast to the loud, public demolition of my family. Remy came back. He showed up at the condo one evening, his key turning softly in the lock. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't have to. He just saw the emptiness in my eyes and pulled me into his arms. Our marriage was strained, the foundation cracked by my secrets and obsession, but it wasn't broken. We were two people standing in the rubble, trying to figure out what was still worth saving. I didn't sell the house. I couldn't. It felt wrong to profit from the wreckage. Instead, I hired contractors. They tore out the dated granite countertops and ripped up the plush beige carpets. They painted over the champagne-coloured walls in clean, bright shades of white. I was erasing the ghosts, preparing the space for a new life. Elias helped me connect with a local non-profit that helps families transitioning out of homelessness. We drew up a lease agreement that was far below market rate. It wasn't charity, it was a balancing of the scales. a gesture of karma paid forward. My parents ended up renting a small 2-bedroom duplex on the other side of town. Their vibrant social circle, once the centre of their universe, had evaporated, the whispers of their downfall more potent than years of loyalty. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that my mother had taken a job as a receptionist at a dental office. My father, quiet and withdrawn, spent his days gardening in their tiny shared backyard. Callie moved in with Roslyn, her pregnancy the only thing tethering her to a future she hadn't planned. Her dream of being a wealthy suburban wife had vanished, replaced by the stark reality of impending single motherhood with no financial safety net. The golden crown was gone for good. I started seeing a therapist, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. In our first session, she asked me if I regretted what I did. I thought about it for a long time, the silence stretching in her quiet office. "I don't regret taking the house," I said finally. "I regret the cost. I regret what it did to Remy. I regret losing the baby." The words came out choked, the first time I had said them aloud to anyone but my husband. "The two things aren't connected, Soleil," she said gently. "The stress didn't cause the transfer to fail. These things happen. You can't carry that guilt." But I knew, on some level, they were connected. Not medically, perhaps, but thematically. I had been so focused on taking a life from them, their comfortable, privileged life, that I had lost the chance to create a new one. The irony was brutal. One Saturday, Remy and I were at the house, doing a final cleaning before the new family moved in. The afternoon sun streamed through the newly washed windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The house felt lighter, cleansed. "It looks good," Remy said, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. "You did a good thing here." I leaned back against him, breathing in the smell of fresh paint and lemon cleaner. "I don't feel like a good person." "You're not a bad person either," he said, kissing the top of my head. "You're just a person who was pushed too far. Now, we just have to figure out how to move forward." We were still figuring it out. Some days were good, filled with the easy comfort of our shared history. Other days, the ghost of my obsession lingered between us, a reminder of the secrets I'd kept. Healing wasn't a straight line. I don't know if I'll ever speak to my family again. Maybe one day, years from now, when the wounds have scarred over, but I doubt it. Some things, once broken, can't be pieced back together. They can only be swept up and thrown away. I bought my freedom with the mortgage they called a burden. I bought revenge with the silence they never noticed. It cost me a child. It almost cost me my marriage. But standing there, in that clean, empty house, I felt something I hadn't felt in 35 years. I felt a sense of peace. For the first time in my life, the math was mine to do. And the books were finally balanced.